Hello, Internet, and welcome to my review for the final episode of Angels of Death, episode 16. When we last left our heroes, they were running up Zack and Rachel were running up the final staircase to freedom, when they were stopped by a variety of cages, boulders, a building collapsing around them, and finally, at the very exit to the building where they've been striving for the past 16 weeks, Danny showed up, shot Rachel a couple times, and was about to shoot Zack before Gray came and shot him in the arm with a crossbow. Gray told Zack to get out of there, take Rachel, she'd be fine, she wasn't dead yet. And then the episode ended with, Danny pointing the gun at Zack and Rachel. And that's where we left off. So going right into this episode, the first thing that really happens is Gray shoots Danny again, letting Zack and Rachel escape. And that's a quick little moment. It's great, you know. But it does kind of lead me into my first big point of the episode, is that Gray, this whole time, has always been one of the more confusing characters. You know, at first it kind of makes sense, and it's like, oh, you know, he wants to prove that religious people aren't that moral, which, I mean, I guess. But then he started helping Zack and Rachel, and so his motivations don't really change. The confusing nature of his motivations don't really change by the end of this scene. But I think I figured it out. I think that the reason he decided to help Zack and Rachel is that he learned through Rachel's development that, you know, he had seen that people were either, you know, people were all one thing. And when he saw that Rachel was not one thing, that she was rife with contradictions, he was like, she's a witch, we have to, like, she's awful, you know, she's a monster. But then he kind of learned that everyone is not one thing. And so he learned that he couldn't just divide people into angels and humans and witches, and that they were all just humans. I think that's it, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But anyway, after that, the building collapsed. Some rubble crushes Gray and Danny dead. They're good. They're not good. They're dead. They're not very happy about that. But you know what? They're finally dead. I'm pretty sure, knowing Danny, he is somehow crawled. He was crushed to death and then lifted it up because he's Danny and no one can kill Danny at this point. Danny is probably still alive, hiding out somewhere. That's my theory. But anyway, Zack and Rachel escape. They finally burst free, and we find out they're in some town somewhere. I had figured this whole time they were out in the middle of nowhere, but no, they're just in a town that just happens to have this weird murder building that no one ever thought to investigate. But when they get out, the police show up, having been attracted by the fire, and they see Zack carrying Rachel, and they instantly assume that he's a criminal and the one responsible for the fire, which is kind of weird, because there isn't really anything. So we've seen in the OP that Zack has a wanted poster around. He's wanted for all these crimes that we learn later on in the episode. He has been connected to all the people he's killed, but you know, you'd think the police didn't show up expecting Rachel Gardner and Isaac Foster to be there. So you think there'd be some, recognition. Oh, that's Isaac Foster. He's a wanted criminal. But instead they see him cradling Ray. You know, you see him cradling Ray, and it's very, gentle. You know, he's unarmed. He's really not doing much of anything to really, I get later on to be like, oh shit, this guy's a wanted mass murderer. Let's arrest him. But yeah, I don't know. It seemed like there should have... The fact they instantly assumed he was evil or a criminal, despite the fact... And that he was responsible for the fire, and that he had, kidnapped Ray, despite there being no evidence for this whatsoever. It just seemed kind of weird. Though I'd be willing to... It's not like I think the rest of the episode's crap because of that, because, I would expect them to eventually figure out, oh, wait, this guy's in our wanted list, let's arrest him. So that's all fine. But then we cut to people, so we find out, you know, We had like a news bulletin of everything that's happened so far, which is honestly is not. I did not expect really anything that happens after this. I did not see coming. I did not see the police being there. I did not see them being in the town. I don't know what I expected, but it was not really something so almost pedestrian. I don't know. It was kind of like it worked for the most part. But it's all kind of weird. It just doesn't really feel like how I expected Angels of Death to end. But we cut to some reporters going around interviewing people, including a detective, who discusses that, like, Zack, has admitted that he killed every other person, but he did not kill Ray. He only cared about Ray. And that the detective believes him. Which is not that important because we never see the detective again. But an interesting thing about this whole segment is that we don't hear the reporter talk. We hear everyone else talk. We hear, like, the detective and eventually the psychologist both talk. But the reporter doesn't... We see, like, the words of the reporter, and we see, like, the back of her head when she interviews the psychologist. More on that in a little bit. But, I don't know, it just seems kind of weird. I don't know, that was a random thing. Also, it's weird that they're interviewing Rachel's psychologist, right? Like, they're asking, like, some of this should have been, like, unanswerable, because, you know, she has a duty to privacy for Rachel, you know? But the psychologist just, like, yammers away everything going on with Rachel, and, you know, she's always asking about the murderer who rescued her. That should really be kept private, honestly. She should lose her license, okay? That's my stance. The psychologist should lose her license. But she doesn't. We have this weird little therapy montage that doesn't really do all that much besides, like, show that it's... Has it been, like, a year? I know we definitely see fall, winter, and spring. I'm not sure if we see the, like, summer or when this show has been set, but it feels like it's been around a year since everything happened. And there's this neat little trick that goes... Neat little detail, more like. As, like, we see... Rachel's hair has always been, like, longish. Or not longish, but, like, pretty long. But it's normally, like, gone to, like, what? Her lower back? And we see in the therapy session, the ends of her hair are, like, resting on the couch at this point. It's a practically meaningless detail, but it's really neat. And I dig it. But afterwards, after this year has passed and it's spring, we get to the last act of the episode, which involves first Rachel, like, outside enjoying her day, I guess, and she hears a news report about Zack, and she, like, goes to investigate while still outside, and whoever's inside changes the channel, I guess, because they hear her, and that just breaks my heart. Rachel cares so much about Zack. It also breaks my heart seeing everyone just not understand what Rachel wants. You know, the psychologist has thought this whole time that Rachel was, like, scared of Zack breaking free, and so she tells Rachel, you know, isn't it great that murderer who you were found with has been sentenced to death and you can sleep calmly tonight. And that's just not what Rachel wants, and it breaks my heart so much. Just, I love them so much. But that night, we have the final scene of the series. And Rachel's thinking to herself, oh, I haven't slept properly since everything in the building. I've just been, like, lying awake here for months and months. And now it's just worse because, you know, Zack's about to die. And then the window shatters, and there is Zack with an inexplicable new scythe, which I totally dig, even if it's completely random. And he's, like, come to, like, he, like, has broken out of jail. We see the cops are, like, coming for him at the building. And he jumps with Rachel out the window. But before we get to that, which I will get to in a little bit, I love the shots of Zack, like, leaning in on the window. You'll see it, leaning in from the window. You'll see it in my thumbnail. He's, like, framed like a hero, come to, like, rescue the damsel in distress from the dragon. Which is a nice little, like, in a sense that is what he's doing. He's come to, you know, rescue Rachel from the people who are holding her captive, that she wants to be rescued by Zack. So in a sense, it does kind of fill up in that, like, medieval fantasy, you know, rescue the princess kind of narrative. But also, like everything else, is kind of touched that macabre sense of he's come to murder her. And it just works really well. Like everything in this series, it works really well. Well, not everything, let's get to in a little bit. This series was not perfect. And then we cut, and you know, he picks up Rachel, they jump out the window, we cut to black. And I was really hoping we get a post-credit scene, and we did, and it was just like a lingering shot on the knife, that we find out Rachel has kept the knife this whole time, somehow no one found it. But it was really nothing scene. Maybe there's something about, like, I feel like there's something to be said about the knife. I just don't know what it is. But yeah. So, in the end, was this a good ending? I think it wasn't great. You know, it had its problems. You know, much like the rest of the show, it definitely suffered while Zack and Rachel were separated. The show was always infinitely better when they were together. And you could, like, feel it pick up once Zack broke through the window and they started, like, talking again. Like, oh shit, this is the show I fell in love with. And, you know, I would have liked some kind of concrete knowledge. I imagine, you know, Zack definitely kills Rachel, off screen. That's definitely what happens. There is no way that ending does not lead to Rachel dying. But, like, does Zack escape? Does he get caught by the police and get executed? I think once he's done killing Rachel, I don't think he'd mind getting executed. You know, I think there's not a whole lot he's really living for at this point. And Rachel is kind of the only thing he had. You know, like, remember at the end, midway through last episode, what's the point of escaping if Rachel's not there? You know, I definitely, like, see that in the end he would, like, turn himself in. Also because he hates lying. And the people would see him as a monster even more, because, you know, they would also know that he killed Rachel, and, oh, my heart breaks for this poor man. But, you know, there were two genuinely great moments, and that was when Zack puts Rachel down and surrenders himself to, like, all for her, and then again when Zack comes to kill her. They're both, like, such great moments. This was still a really good ending, even if it was not perfect. I still really enjoyed it. And that's a wrap on Angels of Death. This show really grew on me. You know, back in July, I was, like, not really feeling it, and it started to pick up by, like, episode 3, but the humor was kind of killing it. It didn't really work as well as it eventually would go on to. I think the Kathy arc and these last, like, 14 and 15 were really, like, the peak of brilliant Angels of Death. Mainly because the show started to, like, suffer. As long as Rachel and Zack worked in the same room, it was not as good. You know, the witch trial tried to kind of, like, bring that energy back, but without Zack, it kind of is missing what makes Angels of Death such a good show. And it did this twice. You know, it did on Gray's floor. We had an episode of Rachel going down. Most of Gray's floor was Zack Light. Then we had the episode where, you know, Zack is wandering around the house as it tries to kill him. And all of these, you know, I think the latter one worked better than the former, but in the end, the show was better every time Zack and Rachel were in the same room. And when it didn't do that, it just was nowhere near as good. Also, the show probably could have been condensed into, like, 13 episodes or so. I've seen people try to, like, make an argument for it as a 12-episode show. I disagree on being that short. I think it could have, though, been, like, 13 episodes. But you know what? In the end, this was still a really fun show. You know, it was wild. It was a show that... it's just so fucking, like, this weird-ass, like, connection of, like, love and murder, that's kind of, like, buoyed it through all of its best moments. And it was just really good. You know, this is a show that I had no expectations of going in. And the first episodes kind of, like, got off on the wrong foot. But by the end, it just blew me away. You know, last episode was so exceptional. You know, last episode to me was the best episode of the show. And, like, God, I'm really glad this was the first show I've reviewed from beginning to end. And I'm really glad it was. This was God, I love this show. Angels of Death, high key recommend. If you have any interest in, you know, weird like friend dynamics, this, like, kind of romance drama, macabre horror, some honestly really good comedy by the end, and just the great relationship between Rachel and Zack. It's a show I'm not forgetting anytime soon. It's a weird show, but it's a show I wholeheartedly recommend to just about everybody. So yeah, that's really all I have for my final Angels of Death review. I hope you all enjoyed this show as much as I did, and hope you enjoyed the episode and the video itself. Nope, we're not going there yet because not time for my outro. My B. I still need to sell you on the channel. If, for whatever reason, you have enjoyed my voice through all this, I have plenty of other commentary, live reaction for manga and anime reviews you can see. I've got, Silver Spoon, Boruto, whenever it comes back from hiatus, Boruto manga, Black Butler, Fire Brigade, whenever it comes back from its translating hiatus, School Live, Blue Exorcist, for your more horror-inclined needs. The Blue Exorcist is not really much of a horror, but it's horror-themed. Eden Zero and Fairy Tail for all of your manga needs. I've also got this season, the Boruto anime, Ghoul 4, which is really disappointing. The new Fairy Tail final season, which has been a lot of fun so far, even if it gets into the worst arc in the series. Goblin Slayer, which is ugh. But we're having fun there. SAO Alicization will be coming eventually, probably in the next week or two. Hopefully by mid-November, it'll be a regular occurrence. And come Wednesday, probably, we will have a very surprise new addition to the lineup that I'm really excited for, and I don't expect to be that excited for. I'm not going to tell you all what it is. There will be an announcement of it in the next few days, but it's going to be wild. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed the series and the episode and the video. If you did, feel free to drop me a like, subscribe, or do whatever the fuck you want. I don't really care. And as always, people, keep kicking ass, and I'll see you in the future. Bye!